Hey church, welcome tonight, and if you are on Facebook, go ahead and hit share so you can share it with all your friends, and if you are on YouTube, like and subscribe so you can stay connected with us. My name is Sarah Fenner and I work with children's ministry, and tonight I'm going to be talking to you about healthy versus unhealthy church. I was reading a book by Mike Breen called Discipleship Shapes. One of the shapes in there is called a heptagon. And in the heptagon, it talks a lot about these different parts of a healthy, growing, moving church. The first part is movement. Now, as I read this, I thought about the Tower of Babel. Beginning with the piece in the heptagon called movement, God had told Noah and his family, be fruitful, multiply, and to spread out. Now, Noah and his family and all the descendants after him, they were fruitful, they multiplied, they grew in number, but they stayed together. And they stayed together and were unified. That's what it says. Now, unity seems like a good thing unless we're united in bad behaviors. That's not good. This is why in his book he says that unhealthy specimens generally don't multiply. And I would challenge that, Mike Breen, and I would say, I think that generally they don't multiply healthy specimens, but they do definitely multiply unhealthy specimens. So if you have an unhealthy plant, it can multiply into more unhealthy plants. Take weeds, for instance. Weeds will definitely multiply, and you don't want them in your garden, but there will be a lot of them if you let them continue to grow. Now, that brings me to the next piece of the heptagon, which is excretion. So when there's a buildup of toxins in our bodies and plants, we have a way of excreting or getting rid of these toxins. Now, spiritually, what are we speaking here? In excreting, spiritually speaking, we're talking about toxins are people or attitudes or habits that we have that are not good, that are not godly, that God doesn't want us to have. So those are toxins that build up in our lives. We need to excrete, get rid of those things. And it's interesting because the very presence of toxin doesn't necessarily say you're an unhealthy Christian, you're an unhealthy church. It says you have toxins that needs to be excreted. What is unhealthy is the unrepentance, unwillingness to get rid of the toxin. That's what makes an unhealthy person or an unhealthy church. So imagine a church that never releases toxins. The unhealthy people in that church will continue to reproduce more unhealthy people. And I think that we've seen other churches in our midst who have allowed toxins, bad attitudes, bad behaviors in people to continue to stay there within the church without being corrected, without being excreted. And those unrepentant people have continued to make disciples to reproduce. And their disciples have grown in that church and have caused more and more toxin. Now, what Mike says this cause is it causes discomfort, disease, and eventually death. If we don't excrete toxins from our body, we will get infections. And eventually, if untreated, we can die from toxins left in our body. And our church body is no different. It's important to continue excreting these toxins so that our reproductive system is healthy, our discipleship system is healthy, because then we can continue to move in the direction that God is leading us. At the Tower of Babel, they didn't want to move. They thought that they could get to heaven without God. They thought that they didn't need him, and they didn't move when God said nicely, be fruitful, multiply, and expand. And so God created extra diversity in them, and he used this as a stimuli to initiate movement. We have to be sensitive to the stimuli God places in our lives. When he's initiating movement in us, it can be uncomfortable, it can be different, but we need to be sensitive to that. God uses a lot of different ways to stimulate his people. So church, Let's not be like the people from the Tower of Babel who try to get to heaven without God, trying to do all of our religious things without really truly growing. Let us remain sensitive to his word and the stimuli that he uses to create movement in our lives. And let us not forsake proper spiritual nutrition, spiritual disciplines, which is another aspect of it. We must create soft and receptive hearts so that we won't be those unmoving, unhealthy people that become toxins within the church that eventually need to be excreted. I pray, God, that you would increase the growth in our church, individually in our lives, and then as a whole in our community of our church family. Church, I want to ask you tonight to think, is there a way that God is trying to move you that you haven't been sensitive to? How are you reproducing? You don't have to have a discipleship group to have disciples. People are looking to you all the time. Your kids, and if you don't have kids, or your kids have already grown up and are not at the house anymore, there's still people in your workplace, your neighbors who are looking to you and are looking to follow your ways as you follow God. So who are you reproducing? What are you reproducing? Is it healthy? And are there toxins, very important, are there toxins in your life, bad attitudes, bad behaviors, people in your life that you need to excrete, that you need to get rid of? Church, let's be those kinds of people that are healthy so that our church can be a healthy church. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. God bless, and we hope to see you soon.